Hi, my name is Pete Joya. Welcome to Portland, and this is America's Security Guard.
Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy, Atypical Security Guard. I want to welcome you to today's episode of America's Security Guard. We're going to be talking to one of the owners of Echelon Security. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself into that camera right there.
All right, my name is Pete Joya. I'm the Regional Director of Operations for Oregon and Washington. And yeah, I guess I am one of the owners of Echelon.
Hey, man, be proud of that. Be proud of that. You should be proud of that. I know
Very
you
proud.
are. I know
Very
you are.
proud. Yeah.
So everybody right now is aware, all across the country, we have seen mass protests that have broken out. This past weekend was what was called the No Kings protest. Over the past couple of months since the inauguration of the president, we've seen multiple protests that have sprang up. Here in Portland, protests are I would say like almost a weekly or a monthly thing. And today, Pete and I are going to be talking about our experience working in the 2020 protests that ultimately became what's known as the Summer of Love riots. It's very important for private security guards. Hopefully, if you're watching this video, you're following this channel, you are in the private security guard industry. It's very important to understand a couple of the safety things that go along with working in private security, especially if you're working in the executive protection area of that kind of a detail in the protest. And so Pete thought it would be a great idea for us to just sit down today, kind of share our experiences, and maybe through some of the things that we've experienced and gone through, it can help you guys, because this is a aspect of the industry that I really think we're going to see explosive growth over the next couple of years. It doesn't seem that the desire to protest is going to change here in Portland, and it's going to probably continue to be a big issue throughout the country. And for the most part, it seems like this is something that we're going to be dealing with. So news agencies, private businesses, apartment complexes, hotels, various aspects of industry just in society is going to be looking to private security to fill those gaps, because a lot of law enforcement departments are simply taking the stance that we're not getting involved. So that opens up a lot of opportunity for private security. Our biggest concern is that, having worked in that environment, we know how dangerous it can be. And we know how quickly something very mundane, very, very small, very simple can turn into a major issue. So what are kind of your thoughts on what's going on right now in terms of the protests, not just here in Portland, but across the country? Just kind of what's your feeling on that from a security aspect?
Protests, like you said, protest activity in Portland has always been the case. I think Portland's very proud of its ability to vocalize its stance on major issues. I think that there's a lot of very passionate people in the city of Portland. And so that being the foundation of why you see these movements happening all the time in the Portland area, I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think it's great that we live in a city where people are invigorated with that feeling of, I need to go out there, I need to vocalize my thoughts, I need to let people know what my stance is, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
And from a security standpoint, when it comes to peaceful protests, there's a lot there when it comes to the standard executive protection work. It really depends on what type of detail you're doing as well. Like you mentioned, there's a handful of ones. My biggest experience is with local news agencies and national news agencies. So from that standpoint, your MO in those details is, I'm in charge of the reporter and I'm in charge of the camera person. My job isn't to dictate what they film or how they film. My job is just to make sure that nobody touches the camera and the reporter can safely do their cuts or their live shots, reporting that whatever it is going on. So from a security standpoint, you're required to be fluid. You need to be flexible with your client, because they are the ones essentially running the show. They're the ones that are telling you, hey, we're going to go here, we're going to go there. And so you don't have the ability to do in advance. You don't have the ability to have a structured schedule of, all right, from these 15 minutes, we're doing this, doing that. No, you have to be very fluid. And with that fluidity, you need some good rapport with the people that you're working with, and the rapport of the people that you're going to be surrounded by. Because people kind of get turned off a little bit when they see a camera and a reporter doing what they're doing,
Yeah.
people either will have one or two reactions. Number one, they'll get aggressive with the camera or the reporter, like, why are you filming this? What are you doing? Are you telling our side of the story? Or two, you get people who take advantage of this as a silly opportunity to jump in front of your shot, or make a explicit gesture in the camera, and you can't
say something crazy.
You're live on the on Channel 6 News. So those are the types of situations that you run into when it comes to the peaceful protests, and your job really is incorporated around I'm with the camera person, or I'm with the reporter, and you usually in those details you need 2 or 3 trained individuals to fully have a secure group.
When you talk about training, that's a great segue, because we talk about the lack of training across the board, and that's just in everyday patrol security, right? When you're talking about protests, now everything is exasperated, and the same issues that would be a problem in a patrol capacity now become even more amplified. The need to be able to be situationally aware and understand what's to the front, the back, the left, and the right of you. To also be able to regulate your own emotions in a stressful situation, because things will become stressful at the drop of a dime, right? And then also understanding the importance of, for a lot of security guards, they're working in this environment probably for the first time. So my question to you, like, what training did you have to work in that environment?
Sure. So I had the fortunate ability to get formal executive protection training in 2016 through Oatman and Associates, and they're a executive protection school based in Maryland.
Okay.
So I went and did a week-long course training that was 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. 5 days a week. So incorporated a lot of training. It included defensive driving training, how to follow your protectee through public spaces.
Right.
Lot of book work. A lot of experts came in and gave their opinions on it. People who had worked in presidential details or had worked for the Secret Service. So that was a really great training opportunity for me in 2016 to go to that. It just so happened that all of that training could now be applicable to the political situation that we've had over in Portland, specifically over the last 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years, easy.
2016, we had the protest in Portland, and not long after that school, after finishing that training, I got hired on to do the protection detail for the news crew in 2016, and I was doing that. That training became even more prevalent in 2020 when it came to the continued protests and the George Floyd protests that happened, the Summer of Love in Portland. So doing executive protection work is very different than doing private security work. There are some similarities, but the training that goes into it is very different. And just because you do good security doesn't mean that you will do well in the executive protection world, and vice versa too.
What would you say would be like 3 of the attributes that are most important to executive protection that don't necessarily I'm not going to say aren't needed in patrol security, but you're saying like there's an importance to the things that we do in executive protection that are a lot different than private security. So what would you say would be 3 of those things?
I think that's hard to narrow down, but what I will say is that executive protection work has a lot of soft skills.
Right.
Soft skill development that requires that individual to be good at, let's just say, communication.
Right.
I would say communication is key. How you communicate to your client, how you communicate if there's an issue, the demeanor that you carry when you're communicating outwards to the people that are watching you do that job. Communication is key. Flexibility. I think when it comes to security, there's all right, I know I'm supposed to patrol this building at this time, or I'm supposed to check these doors, these windows, and I need to write this report, and it all gets done by this time frame. It's very structured, or it can be very structured. There's not a lot of structure in EP, or working in those types of details. It's, I show up, we do our brief, and then 5 minutes into it, the whole plan's out the window, and now we're on fluid motion.
You know what a perfect example of that is? Like the first night that I was going to do executive protection for the news agencies, I reached out to my supervisor and I'm like, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what I'm doing here. And he goes, you do know what you're doing. You just have to boil it down. You know, all I want you to do, like you said, make sure that nothing happens to the reporter and make sure that the camera doesn't get broken. Aside from that, be as safe as possible and do what you can to get these people from point A to point B. However, understand that you don't get to dictate what they do, where they go, or how they get there. And he was like, if you just stick to that, you'll be fine. So I'm like, okay. So me being the kind of person that wants to, like, you know, put my best foot forward and like really show that I'm doing a good job, I go down to the area where I know we're going to be filming. And I'm like, I'm going to go the day before and just kind of scout things out. And the protest is already going off. So I'm looking at side streets and I'm trying to be covert and taking pictures of like street signs. And I have this whole plan in my head about how we're going to get down there and how we're going to get out. And the second that we go down there the next day, the protest is twice as big and the police have moved in. So now like any opportunity to go in this certain direction or these certain streets, it's gone.
You bring up a good point though, which is that basic strategy of doing it in advance, right? So I like that you go down to an area, scope it out, see what it looks like, look for avenues. The advanced portion of your job doing EP work is super important. And I would say that would be another, wouldn't say that's a soft skill, but that would be one of the top skill sets that you need to be able to identify when you walk into an area. What do you look for? You're looking for exits, you're looking for safe road closures, you're looking for where can I park the car, where can we do a safe pickup?
We got to bug out, where do we go?
Where are the bathrooms? You know, where's the good food? You know, if we need to take a lunch break. So doing the advanced portion is super important. I like what you do, but in the protest activity also, like things change
in a heartbeat.
So you're advanced, you do that and you go, okay, I know I'm going to take this road and then we can use this restaurant and then this is the bathroom. And then we get there and it's like, well, that restroom's closed. That road's closed. Can't park the car there anymore.
That restaurant's boarded up. That one's burning.
That one's burning. So, all right, now we're kind of in a fluid situation. So, you know, that was such a learning experience for me in 2020 specifically, because there was no real safe areas when we were in it. And again, when it comes to this type of work, understanding what your job is. My job isn't to enforce private property laws at that point. My job isn't to stop vandalism. My job isn't to call the police if there's people protesting or blocking traffic. I have a sole primary duty. My primary duty is to the camera and the camera person and the reporter.
You get very singularly focused.
And you have to stay focused on that goal because it's very difficult when you're out there watching everything happen and you're like, well, I need to do something. You have a specific role you're playing in all of this.
Absolutely.
So being able to narrow down that focus, understand what your job is, and like you were saying as well, is like, well, I don't know what I'm doing. You do. It's very basic. But there's sub details in there that you'll end up learning as you go through that experience.
I think that one of the hardest things for me to accept, and you made a great point, like you're not here to do X, Y, and Z. If you're working in private security, or if you're in law enforcement, or if you're former military, or you're just I'm going to say this with no disrespect to anybody that protests. If you're on the opposite side and you're just a sane, sober person, it is so difficult to watch things happen in front of you that you know are wrong. It was so hard for me to watch people break windows. It was hard for me to watch people set buildings on fire or cars on fire or assault people. And this is all happening literally within arm's reach. And so to tell yourself, this is not my problem, this is not my issue, this is not why I'm here, that is really hard to turn that off. And that's why we saw so many security guards in 2020 that found themselves getting caught up. There was the guy in Denver that ended up pulling his firearm. He worked for Pinkerton, I believe, doing news detail just like we were doing.
The guy in Seattle? That disarmed that.
The guy in Denver actually shot the protester in the face. I don't know what happened to him. But yeah, like that's something that, short of having very specific training for EP work or getting the quick on the job training like a lot of us did, That's very difficult to understand and to be able to validate and quantify that. How did you handle the stuff that you saw? Like, how did you handle going home at night and being able to turn it off? I had a really hard time with that.
Oh yeah, I mean, compartmentalization is part of that, and that's not. I'm not advocating for that as a healthy approach to dealing with those things, because the things that you did see or were exposed to, it's traumatic no matter what way you try to chop it up. I could be some hardcore, seen it, been in war kind of guy, and you go into that type of environment and there's going to be some traumatic effects that happen. So for me, it was continuously focusing on, all right, what was my mission? Did I accomplish my mission? Did I do a good job? Did everybody that I was responsible for get home safe tonight? If the answer was yes, I did a good job. The BS that came from the periphery of all of that, compartmentalize that into something different. But you compound that into 120, 130 days of doing that over and over and over again, like I know you and I did. It stresses a whole nother issue that I've become more passionate about with the private security industry specifically, is access to mental health services.
100%.
I've been especially over these last couple of years, and not taking the protest activity out of context, but even just in the private security world in general, that's a whole nother topic that I feel like deserves
its own conversation.
In that. So I sought out mental health services and it was beneficial for me. I'm an advocate for it. So that's one other way that I learned to compartmentalize and process some of that, is through additional help. But I've also been doing this for a long time. And I knew that as long as I got everybody home safe, everybody I was responsible for made it through the night, and the news was able to get what they did, and all right, my job was done. And I take a lot of pride and accomplishment in being able to do my job correctly and doing it well.
Well, here we are in 2025. We've come full circle. And so now we're right back where we started. You and I are, what I would say, are in different places than we were in 2020. We're not necessarily looking to go back into that environment or be a part of that. For the security guards who are in Portland, security guards who are across the country who might find themselves in their first executive protection role working in a protest, what would be 3 things that you would say to them to really focus on for them to be safe?
Your equipment.
Okay.
What kind of equipment are you bringing out with you? Because having equipment for yourself so you can still do your job, whether that's being, so you can see or you can breathe. So having the correct equipment. One thing that I was really appreciative of with the detail that I went out with in 2020 and 2016 is everyone had a go pack. And in that go pack, we had baby oil, baby soap. We had
baby oil,
baby oil and soap. And, we had all of this great equipment. The gas masks were a big deal. The baby soap was a big deal. We had first aid, we had extra gloves, we had flashlights, we had water, we had food, and it was all compacted into a bag. And I felt prepared. So in any situation that I walked into, feeling prepared with the gear that you have would be number 1.
Okay.
Number 2 would be check yourself. Check your own demeanor. Check your own ability to be calm in those situations. If you had a really bad day, or if you're fighting with your significant other at home,
out.
or if your kids are sick, or if there's something significant happening in your life that's going to distract you from being able to stay focused in that environment, you need to reevaluate your position, because you need to be able to walk into that and be 100% focused. Because this is people's lives, and this is a fluid situation. This is a political movement. You're on public streets, you're amongst things that are on live television. So there's a different mentality that needs to be in place for that. And then the third is seek some type of formal training, whether that's through an accredited group or that's through your own organization. If they offer some type of in-house training for executive protection, please go through some type of formal training. Just because you do private security and you may do private security very well doesn't mean that you can do executive protection well. There are other skills that need to be focused in on. There are other soft skills that need to be developed that you can't develop necessarily through just doing private security. So equipment, communication, training, know your own body, know where you're at, know your mentality. Those are the three things that I would, say that that's crucial to walk in.
In preparation for this conversation, I was thinking about my attire and my go bag when I first started, which would have been in like July of 2020 versus where everything was in January of 2021. Mm-hmm. First time I went out, multiple magazines of ammunition, plate carrier, concealed plate carrier. I'm wearing tactical boots, very heavy jacket, and by the time I finished, I'm wearing sneakers. My go bag is 2 gas masks, a couple of the extra respirator inserts, probably 5 to 6 bottles of water to be able to flush my own eyes out or the eyes out of the people that were around me. The Johnson & Johnson's baby soap, not oil, right? The Johnson & Johnson's baby soap, that's very good at helping getting the OC out of your eyes. And then just being as comfortable as possible. Because again, the thought process for me, and I think for a lot of younger, newer security guards, when I say younger, I don't mean in age, I mean in time of the industry. You think of this, especially in Portland, where we had Homeland Security, Portland Police Bureau, the Sheriff's Department, and then you had the federal group that was here. You're going into a very tactical environment. So your thought process, or my thought process was like, I need to be ready for this. But you quickly realize that you're not there to engage. And you and I had this,
roles are very different.
Very different. And you and I had this conversation where you were like, even if you were to engage, if you got yourself in a situation where you had to engage someone, what do you think the outcome is? And I thought that we really need to touch on that in this conversation, because so many guys have the attitude, F around and find out. Mm-hmm. Okay. When we were working the protest, what were there, 20,000 people down there? It's like you don't have 20,000 rounds.
It's a big ass backpack.
And even if you do,
that you need.
This was so important that you said this. Even if you do, if you're justified, you're ethically, legally justified to pull and engage that threat, then what? Let's talk about that.
So just because I don't want this to be super controversial.
Of course.
I want to make it abundantly clear that there are different ways for people to go about doing executive protection work.
Right.
There are groups that train people that say, hey, you carry a firearm for work and we're going to train you in firearm proficiency because carrying a firearm is part of your executive protection work.
Right.
There are organizations that don't do that because they don't want the primary focus to be your job is to engage and stop a threat.
Right.
Your job is to get your protectee to a safe location as soon as possible, regardless if there's a threat.
Right.
Your job isn't to engage that threat. There's a threat. My job is to evacuate and move away.
Because if you're engaged in that threat, who's watching
this person?
Yeah.
So there are a variety of different ideas and strategies around it. My philosophy was, especially in the 2016, 2020, and now the 2025 protests, is I don't want to bring a firearm down. And I get a lot of flack from different people, saying, why? What's your logic behind not bringing a gun down to a very volatile situation? And it goes back to what we were talking about. Let's just say I am justified in using lethal force on somebody, and my life is imminently in threat, or the life of somebody else is an imminent threat, and I use lethal force to stop them. Then what? I've just engaged and lethally shot a protester in a politically charged environment on live television, in front of 5,000 other people.
Right.
There's not a good scenario for that.
Yeah.
I don't see that playing out well for the security guard. I don't see that playing out well in that environment. I think it has a potential of making it even more dangerous.
Right.
And there could be more aggravation because of that. And so to just take that out of the equation, period, and not have that be an option, I just didn't carry a firearm.
I already know that people are.
I know. That's why I was afraid to
No,
talk.
God,
I know,
what are you thinking?
I know. And I own guns. I'm a gun advocate. I believe in the Second Amendment.
You're running armed security
I'm
company.
running an armed security company. Right. I want people to have armed security. I'm just saying that there are situations where there are other ideas and options to take into account. And it requires that critical thinking to decipher and play that what if scenario game. Play that with yourself. Ask yourself those questions. What if I do shoot somebody? What happens then? Well, then I'm going to carry 5 extra magazines in my bag. Is that the best use of the type of equipment that you want to be carrying?
Right.
I'd rather be carrying 2 or 3 extra gas masks or extra respirators or more baby soap,
right.
Or water.
Yeah.
Those are more important tools to have than 4 extra magazines because I'm afraid I'm going to get into a firefight.
And I think that like when you're talking about the kind of person that fits the motif of who you want working in that environment, critical thinking and being able to understand and articulate nuance and ambiguity, because so much of what we do, it bleeds into nuance, right? Mm-hmm. And so for the people who hear what Pete is saying and you're thinking to yourself, I would never go into this environment with a firearm.
I know. I can bet there's tons of people that are super upset right now.
But you do have to think about so many things that are amplified outside of just doing the job. Thinking about the video footage, thinking about the potential issues it could cause for the security industry across the board. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of people don't think about that. Yes, you might be justified. You might get out of it. Nothing happens to you legally, like everything works out. But then there's this industry-wide clamp that comes down on private security being able to even work in this environment moving forward. So there's so many things that happen that you have to be aware of. And I think that is something that's often overlooked, is the importance of people being able to understand that small ambiguity and nuance that comes into it.
And private security on its own has enough scrutiny as a group or as an organization in the capacity that it currently is when it comes to justified use of force or security guards carrying firearms. There's a lot of conversation about that, and that's a whole nother topic that I think we could cover and sit down and go over, specifically just about that.
Absolutely.
But take what I'm saying as this is my
your opinion. No,
my preference, my opinion, my situation when I'm talking to myself about what I am going to do this night or what my goals are. None of it is revolved around I need a gun in order to do this job. I think that there is arguments for both sides, and I see that. And if you are going to carry a gun in that situation, know what the consequences will be after the fact you're going to be using it too. Just take that into account. And that's that critical thinking mindset that you need to have in these types of jobs. It's not just you came across a person conducting a burglary on private property and all of your ducks line up in a row to make an arrest, or if they pull a knife on you or something like that. It's a completely different set of circumstances. Yeah. So it requires a completely different set of responses and different set of thinking.
I wish that we could go through all of the list of things that you have to be able to do in terms of communicating with people, but also being able to utilize defensive communication, right? Letting someone know that, hey, we have a job to do, we're leaving. Being willing to take the L. So many times where I had to just tell protesters or people that were engaging in a riot and they're coming up and I'm like, hey, we're leaving. You know what I mean? And sometimes I had to tell the reporter or I had to tell the cameraman, I am telling you from a professional opinion, this is where we need to stop.
Yep.
If you choose to go forward, I'm not going with you any further. I'm going to stay here or I'm going to retreat. I'm leaving. And very rarely did I have a news reporter that fought me. I had a lot of cameramen that wanted to do their own thing.
Yeah.
That was probably the only issue where there was ever any butting of heads. And I tried to always be respectful and understanding and empathetic to what they were going through. But,
I think you touched on something really important, which comes down to communication and rapport building, right? So I don't know what it was like for your circumstance, but for me, I always was assigned usually the same 2 to 4
same
different.
2 to 3.
Yeah. So over time, you build rapport with the reporter, with the camera person, and you learn what their comfort levels are and what they aren't. So I had a reporter and a camera person who didn't like going into the muck of it and didn't like being in there as things are going off behind them and doing their live shot. And they were more passive. They wanted to be on the outside. They wanted to film safe. And I was like, great, awesome. Then I had another group that was the exact opposite. Yeah. They were always
cowboys.
We're going in, and we're going in hot.
Yeah, they're like the crew from Twister.
Yeah,
they're like, ah!
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. And so, in the national news agencies that I did, they were very similar to that too. I mean, they just got on a plane and had a 6-hour flight to come into Portland to film this.
You better believe
you think they're going to go stand, 2 blocks away and do that?
Right.
Nope, we're on the front lines with that. So, and being able to engage in that environment, because at the end of the day, you can draw a hard line, like, hey, this isn't a safe environment anymore, and we need to leave. Knowing when to call that, because remember, this is a news agency that has a producer on the other end that's saying, we need this content, you need to be here for this live shot. There are thousands of people watching our news network that are depending on you to get this answer.
They didn't want to hear it.
They don't want to hear that. So you have to, if you're going to make that call, stand firm in that call that you're making, and know that there's a catalyst of events that happen because of that call.
So a great thing that we can take, a great nugget of information, is that much like in security and every other capacity, every decision that you make or don't make is going to cascade into a whole nother set of circumstances or situations. I made that call twice. So from July all the way to, I'd say, February of 2021, I only made that call twice. And I saw guys that got removed from the detail that were trying to be too, I don't want to say controlling, but trying to dictate what the cameraman or the
gotta have that flexibility.
You have to have that flexibility. And this is where communication with the people that are above you is so important. I would get to the news station about 30 to 45 minutes earlier, and I would try to talk to the lead producer. I would try to talk to some of the directors, kind of the bigwigs that were there, and just share my concerns, because these people were never going down. They were in charge, and they were sending reporters, they were sending camera people down, they were in charge of, the security staff, but they weren't going down there. So that 30 minutes of just conversation about, man, this is what it's like, this is what we're seeing, this is what I'm concerned about, it really gave me a little bit more grace in being able to kind of leverage that and utilize that. And this is why I say to security guards out there, I understand that most companies don't want you or do not allow you to have interaction with people that are kind of at that upper management level on the sites that you're working.
Yeah,
but it is so important to create that rapport. And I'm not telling you to violate your post orders or go against the directives of your companies, but I am saying you have to get comfortable talking to people and communicating with people. There were security guards that were on the EP detail with me that never said anything. And, they were the strong, silent type. Maybe they were former military and they were great at what they did. But by not creating that rapport with that reporter or that cameraman or the people that worked in that location, when they did finally speak up and make that demand that we're out or we're not going to do that, then it came across the wrong way.
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act.
You bring up a good point, which is an important aspect of all of this, which is the operations aspect of it. So who's running your op? We as EP, we had somebody running the op. We had our own producer that was not on the street, that was the one that gave us this detail, who was in charge of assigning people to these protection groups. Yeah. What is the operations doing to help support those groups, those security guards that are in those scenarios? Yeah. So when you work for an organization, make sure that you have a strong operational background, or the person running your op has a strong operational background, and that they have some context to work off too. Yeah. I think that is equally as important and as a contributor to the success of those details in having a good back house operations set.
Absolutely.
Because if I am looking at my group of people from somebody in my position, if I was asked, all right, we've just got tasked to do security EP work for 3 different new organizations this weekend. So you need, 9 people. Okay, I'm not going to just pick the 9 people that are available on the schedule. I need to look at what type of news agency are we doing? Is it a local? Is it national? All right, how many people? Is it nights or days? All right. what is the experience of the people that I'm looking at? Do they have the critical thinking skills? Have they been able to show that they have the capability of being in a fluid situation? Do they have previous experience? And assigning those who have the best chance of success into those groups.
Yeah.
It takes more forward thinking to do this type of job correctly. It's not just plug and play or warm body on a post.
Yeah.
That's when it becomes dangerous.
Yeah.
And you put people who are inexperienced or don't necessarily have the right mentality or critical thinking skills to go into that environment, and then you run into situations like that where I have a guy pulling the news crew out 3 blocks away.
Yeah.
Well, now their producer's really upset because you
Hot.
missed the 6 o'clock show.
Yeah.
You know, and so there's a balancing act there. And so just to stress that to everybody that's watching is have good operations.
Yeah.
You know, the group that you're a part of, make sure your operation group is solid. Make sure that the person in charge of that operations is somebody that you have good rapport with, and that they are the ones also exercising that rapport with those that need to be communicated with outside of the ones that are physically on the ground, if that makes sense.
To wrap this up, would you, if you know, with your experience in terms of managing the company that you're in charge of now, but then also looking back at what you experienced working in that environment, would you suggest to officers who are out there, security guards who are out there, to get into this line of work, specifically doing protest or riots? Would you suggest that they do that?
I think it really depends on what your overall goal is as an individual.
Okay.
For me, I'm very fortunate to have gone through that experience, in my opinion. Was it traumatic? Did it suck? Were the hours awful? And was the pay not enough? Absolutely, all of the above. But the experience that I got from that was invaluable. Yeah. It's experience that you can take with you to other parts of your life or back into the security industry alone, or if you leave the security industry and go somewhere else. Yeah. At the end of the day, if it's nothing else, it's a great story to tell at dinner.
Heck of a story.
Heck of a story to tell at dinner, you know. Yeah. But I encourage those that feel like they're curious about becoming more involved in the executive protection world. I encourage it. It's a very fun world to be in. It's not all James Bond and glorious, though. Like, people need to understand that EP work 99% of the time is customer service skills, soft customer service skills, 99% of the time. Yeah. The 1% is when shit hits the fan, and now you have to do your job, and you have all of these critical thinking matters that you need to take into account. And are you the type of person that can be cool under pressure? Yeah. You know, freak out on your own after you're off work in your own time in your own home. But in the moment, you need to have that cool, calm demeanor, because people are going to look at you.
And they're depending on you.
They're depending on you to make a decision and to keep them safe. So 100% encourage it, 100%. Get formal training, though. Don't just hop into it and be like, I think I can do this. You know, I'm going to try it out one night and I'll just sign up for it. Get some formal training. There are places in Oregon that have formal training. There are nationally accredited EP schools that you can go to. Oatman was the one that I went to. I highly recommend it. Robert Oatman is a great wealth of knowledge. He has a ton of experts that help train people, and they do courses all year long. So get the training, because you can't learn everything in this industry. It's always best to get more and more and more training.
And so for those of you who are like me and didn't get the training, but you ended up down there anyway.
Learn on the job.
Learn on the job, but be open. Be open to the information on how to do it. Yep. And again, I was lucky enough to have a mentor who now works for us. It was Jimmy. Mm-hmm. I was lucky enough to have a mentor and a supervisor who was like, I understand this is new to you. These are the 3 to 4 things I want you to focus on. Mm-hmm. Do these 3 to 4 things and be your professional self, and you're going to be fine. Yeah. And call me if there's a problem. Yeah. So be open, be willing to learn, to listen, and just be humble. I think being humble is probably one of the most important things. You're not John Wick, you're not Rambo, you're not going to go out there and make people do anything. Mm-hmm. So you have to have the right mentality when you're in that environment, because it can go south.
Yeah, and to give a quick shout out, you know, I had a great mentor and trainer in the 2016-2020 protests, Scott Castleman. Yeah. And he is really good at what he does. And he's very good at piecing together those details, having the correct equipment, knowing the client and assigning the correct people to that client. Scott was the best person I could have worked for at that time to make sure that I was successful. And we were just, to this day, we text back and forth, and I was texting him over the weekend being like, hey, thinking about you guys. I heard his voice on a live shot on the news, and I was like, hey, heard you in the background. Be safe out there. So he's still out there doing it. And I encourage people that there are opportunities out there to learn. Get with the right people to learn and be open-minded, like you said, and be safe. Be safe.
Pleasure.
Dude, pleasure's all mine, man. This was fun. I want to do it again.
Thanks a lot, guys. Take care.
Thank you.